when things are falling apart and the light seems dim, that's when it is often the hardest to hold on to our faith. We start asking, where is God? And eventually blaming Him for our bitterness. And ultimately, we start to forgetting His goodness, His sovereignty, and even His deep love for us. In today's episode, I'll be talking with Kayla Telano.
Hey.
Kayla is a certified clinical research coordinator at a urology clinic in Shreveport. And she and I met a long time ago at a camp, Cedar Springs. You might have heard of it. I talk about it a lot on here. But we met there a long time ago. And she's with us today and going to share her story. She's going to tell us how she overcame a dark time in her life by not forgetting, but instead remembering the goodness of God. So, Kayla, thank you for being on our show today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we tried a few days ago, but didn't work out. And so I'm just glad we're able to reschedule it and that you're able to be here. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
It's definitely. I think I texted you the devil. I feel like he was just doing everything he could to make that not happen. So for whatever reason, this was.
Yeah, he shall not win.
I was like, we are going to do this if I have to drive there.
Mm-hmm. So. How did you survive some the snow days we just recently had?
I wouldn't even call it surviving. I was truly living. Those were some of the best days. I love winter. I love the cold months and just being cozy. And so that's literally all I did is I stayed in my PJs and I binge watched Netflix and movies and made soup and my dog just lived it up. So there was no surviving. It was truly just
thriving. Yeah.
Life, honestly. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. The rest, honestly.
I wish I could have rested more fully. I had my 3-year-old with me because, he didn't have school either. And that was but we got through and it was some sweet moments. So yeah. Well, today we are here to hear your story. And so if you'd like to tell us, where does your story start?
So the story that we're going to talk about today, or the season of my life, it was back in 2017. So I was 22 years old. I just graduated college. I went to Northwestern State in Natchitoches and I just moved to Shreveport to start PA school. So physician assistant school at LSU Health. So that's kind of the beginning, I guess, of where all this started. Yeah. So what was going on? What made that a tough time? So it started out, it was just the start of a new season. So when I was in college at Northwestern, I was heavily involved in the DCM, the campus ministry, and was just always surrounded by just really godly people and encouraging people that were pouring into me. And when you're in college, that becomes home, especially because I'd moved off. So Natchitoches and Northwestern and my frat made the best friends. And so it's all of a sudden you graduate and then life moves on, and all of the people that you spent every day with for the past 4 years move off and they're in different places. And it's just kind of a culture shock thing. Yeah, just really disorienting. Yeah. And so that alone kind of threw me for a loop. I also I studied biology. And so the 4 years, besides just all of the really fun, stuff I did at VCM and all that, it was difficult. that was a hard major, and my plan was always to go to PA school. That was my dream. I've always been very driven, and there was never a plan B. It was just, that's my plan. I'm going to do it, and it just is what it is, And so I graduated, and I actually had applied to PA school earlier. You apply a year in advance.
Oh my gosh.
And long story short, I actually had been put on the waiting list. It's really difficult to get in. I think it was 28 people.
Wow.
And so I was put on the waiting list, and it was only a month before graduating that I received notice that I was accepted.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Accepted. So it was oh my gosh, my dreams are coming true. Everything I've worked so hard for, is happening. And so but just like that, all of my plans changed because I didn't know if I was going to get in. And if I didn't, my plans were to probably move back here to West Monroe and stay home and figure out a job option until I got in. Or if I got in, pack up and move to Shreveport.
Yeah.
So the fact that I only had a few weeks notice kind of threw me off. So it was all of a sudden, okay, I graduated college. like, and then was all of a sudden moving to Shreveport and like packing. I mean, I had like 2 weeks from graduating college to when I started PA school.
So it's like
a week of that was on a mission trip in West Texas where there was no cell service or anything. And so like I had my parents here, you know, going to get my books and my scrubs and all these things and figuring out living arrangements and all this crazy stuff. And anyway,
wow,
it was just a really hectic. It went from being a really, really exciting time, like graduating and getting into PA school, to like just chaos.
Yeah, because you need time for transition, and you weren't given time for that.
Yeah, and so
or a brain break.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it was just, I mean, it was just a really kind of a difficult time, and so this plays a little bit of a role later in the story. But I had a best friend. Multiple. There was a group of 4 or 5 of us that was just really, really close in college, and one of them was just a really good friend, best friends for like 4 years. And kind of early on, and I hate to be this person, but I just truly was like, oh my gosh, this, like, I just believe that this is going to be who God has for me, like my spouse. And finally, I mean, after 4 years of waiting and watching this person date other people and like all these difficult things, just being a best friend to him, my senior year, right before, I actually don't remember if it was right before or right after, but around the same time that I got accepted into PA school, like we pretty much started dating, and it's like all of a sudden everything that I'd been praying about and like planning for and felt like God had for me, like it was all like falling into place. And he lived in Shreveport. And so it was just like I was just so overwhelmed with joy, and I was just so thankful, like, Lord, this is everything that I've been working for, everything I wanted. And I was not one to date many people. I mean, really anyone growing up. I was very guarded and still do have really high standards. And so it's like, not
a bad thing.
Yeah. But if, you know, he those qualities, and I don't know why, but throughout college, I was like, this is the person. So anyway, so that was kind of the start of all of it. And then,
so did y'all break up?
Okay. So this is where the mucky moment starts, really, is started PA school, moved to Shreveport, was getting involved in the church and everything and doing the best I could to adjust. But he was this guy I was dating was kind of my comfort zone and my familiarity, college. But started PA school. The way that they describe what PA school is like on orientation day is like, if you were to take your face and just put it like touching the opening of a fire hydrant and like turning the fire hydrant, that's what PA school is. It's just like your face into it. Like, it's just that insanely difficult and overwhelming, and your life basically gets put on hold for those couple of years. So I started, and at first everything was going great. It was a huge adjustment, but I was making it. But then a few weeks in, it was actually like right before my first finals week, the guy I was dating, sat me down and was like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I don't feel at peace about this anymore. And so basically, long story short, we ended up breaking things off, and I started spiraling mentally. I was already kind of mentally and emotionally drained just from the school and not being able to handle it. It was so much. And I also grew up not really being the best studier, because I always did well in school and didn't have to try super hard. And all of a sudden in PA school, I was like missing my family and my friends, and just like wasn't used to not having those people around me, and was having to do 100% school all the time. And it was just a really difficult time. And so then when we broke up, I felt like everything that was the last piece of comfort that I had, a new place. And so when that ended, I just really spiraled. I mean, I was already having issues with starting to have issues with like anxiety and just a little bit of depression, but then it really sat in, and it's from then I just remember like feeling like in this world of darkness and just super alone, and just really struggling to figure out like why this was happening, because I felt like then I started doing really poorly in school, and it just felt like I was trying so hard and trying to make something work that I felt so certain was the Lord's plan for me. And so when it wasn't like smooth sailing, I was super confused.
And I think that's natural for anybody. So
it was really difficult.
So how long did you stay in that state?
I started school in May, so I just graduated, started, and then it was when I did the summer and the fall semester of PA school. There was a week and a half in between.
That sounds
so many
terrible.
details of things that I can tell you that would make you feel so sad for me, probably. But I won't spend that much time on all of it. But like it basically all goes back to what I was feeling at the time is just constantly like putting as much effort into trying to make this work. And then, like every little thing, it's like one step forward, 10 million steps back is what it felt like, you know. And in between, like after this first semester, I was like, you know what, I was doing better, and I was like, you know what, this is gonna be okay. Like this is what the Lord has for me. He opened this door, like I'm here. And so me and my best friend booked a cruise, and like I was like, I'm gonna get back on my feet and like, you know, come back in the second semester. I'm gonna go strong. And came back, and my housing arrangement, because I didn't give this detail, but I was staying with the grandparents of the guy I was dating at the time. And so that was the other part that was difficult, is like everything I knew involved like that
person. And
the church. I mean, that's the only life I had outside of school.
Community. And this is
so like when I lost that, I felt like I was so alone. So anyway, it kind of continued into the fall. The fall semester started, and things started I just kind of had highs and lows, but then just got to a point where it was like every single day I was just like more and more I was really dealing with depression because like it's like I would stay up all night studying for a test and then just not do well, and I would help others study for that. And it's just like no matter what I did, I felt like I couldn't win in school or in the relationship situation, because I felt like I just lost everything and it was all falling apart, and I wasn't near my family, and I didn't have the support system here or in Shreveport that I needed. And so it was just, I didn't really know what to do. Yeah. So it kind of lasted for the majority of that year, 2017, when towards the end of right before the end of the semester, I chose to withdraw from PA school.
Wow.
And so it was a huge turning point. But
like what was some of the thoughts going into that?
It was kind of just like waving a white flag, like, to be honest, because it's the last thing that I wanted to do. Because again, like this is something like, I truly felt like my life was falling apart. Like everything I'd ever planned for and wanted was, and everything that I thought was God's plan, like just wasn't working. And it's like, I couldn't do well in school anymore. And I just felt like I was constantly failing. Not necessarily. I mean, so in PA school, like a C is like totally failing. I mean,
I understand.
You pretty much have to get A's. Like,
I'm married to a nurse, and my sister's also a nurse, and so like it's another. People in the health field or those kinds of like school, it's just their school experience was way different from mine. And it's just a lot. It's very.
And it was just so abnormal for me. I mean, because I had never. Like this sounds so, I don't mean this in a prideful way, but I never really failed much. Like even in high school, like I always did things I knew I could be successful at. And
well, that's natural too. People do that.
Yeah. And even in school though, I mean, I always gave my all, and I always saw good results, you know, so never struggled with grades and never struggled with just like feeling like a failure. If I tried out for something, I was like, I'm only going to try it if I know I'm going to make it. And, you know, that typically is what happened. Like, and so it was just like all of these things that just felt like they were, it just was, I was kind of at the point where I was in just such a dark place, and I knew that it was a decision I had to make. And so I had to make it. But
like, did you pray about it, or is that something that, or just like on your own decision?
This is the sad part. When I look back at this time in my life, like that really breaks my heart, because I've always been a really faith-filled person. Like my faith's always been number one. I'm not perfect or anything, but like typically my faith is not the thing that gets shaken. During that year, God was like the last thing that I desired. Like, and I don't know, I guess it was just the devil like really creeping in and just using a lot of the insecurities that I developed, and the depression. Honestly, the depression was so severe Like I had just gotten to such a dark place. And I remember so many days like where I physically felt like I was just in a room of darkness and the lights would be on. But I also remember so many times like just laying in bed and just crying. I mean, just because that's all I felt like I could do every single day was just cry. I was exhausted mentally and emotionally like for so long. And I just remember so many days specifically where I would look over on my nightstand and see my Bible physically laying there and just like refuse to open it, knowing that the answer was there.
Yeah. Like I've been through a season like that before. And I remember telling a different friend about that. And she told me like, I think you're like depressed. Yeah. And at that time of my life, I just didn't know enough about depression to really be able to say like, yeah, that's what it was. But 100%. Yeah, definitely was.
So crazy that you say that too, because I was in the same position. Like I was like, I refuse. Like I'm saying it now. Like I know that I was in anxiety and depression, but like at the time, I refused to believe it. And
you're like, nah.
My mom was she's the sweetest person, and she was so concerned. Like I mean, she knew. I mean, when I tell you every single day for months, I would just call and cry. Like and my sister was having to drive in and just stay with me because like it was just I was in such a bad spot. And my mom would say, Kayla, I think you're depressed. Like I really do. Like you need to go see someone. And I was like, Mom, I am not. Like I refuse to believe that reality.
Yeah, but when you don't know, and then but that feeling like looking at your about, because I remember I had a very similar situation like that. Like my year is 2016, but anyways, but you looking at my Bible and being like, like knowing I need to, knowing like that's the key, like that's going to help me. That's going to be my lifesaver, but also like not having I just couldn't. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
It's so crazy because it's like at the same time, I also felt so desperate for like something to bring me out of like that pit of darkness. And no, it's like my flesh, my soul knew that the answer was right there. But the crazy thing I was going to say about the depression is God, when I look back, like I see God's hand in so many of these areas, obviously, but there was one day my mom just kept like saying, Kayla, I really think like this is like we need to figure. She was so worried about me. Yeah. And I'd gone to class the next day and I was just totally spaced out the whole day. I mean, you have to just understand how exhausted mentally I was drained. I wasn't sleeping like ever. I was going days and days without sleeping almost. And I was in class, and for some reason, the only part of the entire lecture that morning that I looked up and paid attention to was all of this. We had a psychologist that had come in to give a lecture, and I wasn't listening to any of it, I'm gonna be honest with you. But then all of a sudden I look up and there's a slide and he's going through like the clinical signs of depression. And it's like a list of all the symptoms. And when I tell you, like in that moment, like tears filled my eyes, and it's like God just took the blindfold, their scales off my eyes, and just like brought me face to face with reality. And for the first time, I think I even maybe said it out loud to myself. I was sitting in the classroom and said, that's me. Like I'm depressed. And I left the classroom and went and talked to my advisor. I was like, I've got to leave. I'm out the rest of the day. I think I went and talked to my advisor and just like poured my heart. She probably thought I was crazy. Poured my heart. I was like, I'm depressed. I don't know what to do. Like, and it just was hysterical. And it referred me like to one of the psychiatrists or psychologists, I don't even remember, but I called my mom right after, and I just cried. I was like, Mom, like, you were right. You know, that's exactly what this is. And so because of that, I was able to start facing the reality of more of what I was dealing with. Yeah. Putting, all of it off.
A little past the denial of,
Oh, for sure. Tons of denial.
Yeah. So what was the turning point in all that?
Once I kind of become faced with reality of like what I was dealing with, it was kind of another one of those heal moments where I was like, okay, I'm gonna conquer this. Like it's still just for whatever reason, like I still had a lot of trouble. And the other reality that I was faced with next is that, you know what, like as much as I thought this was God's plan for me, maybe it's not. I kind of gotten to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna have to give it all to the Lord. Like And there was one night, and specifically, truly one of the most vulnerable moments that I've ever had with the Lord, where I think I was studying for actually it was a final for my fall semester. And I was just like, you know what? I'm sure it was one of those dark nights again, even though I was aware still of what was going on. Yeah. But God just physically brought me to my knees like that night. And because I was crying out to him, and I was like, Lord, like this is finally the moment. Like, I'm giving this to you. Like, this is for the first time, like I'm surrendering my plans and everything I thought that you had for me. And so I like surrendered. I was physically on my floor, like on my knees that night, and just crying out to him. And it's just like he broke me, but in the most beautiful way, like the most humbling way. And I was kind of just at a point where like surrender was really all I had left, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I was able to just breathe. And the moment that I gave that over to him, I just felt this peace that just surpassed all understanding, like scripture talks about. And so the next morning I actually went and gave my notice.
Yeah.
Talked to my advisor and was like, I appreciate everything, but this is my last day. And it was a huge leap of faith because I didn't know what was next.
Yeah. So was it relief mixed with anxiety?
1,000%. Oh yeah. I'm a planner. Yeah. I don't know if I got that out at any point, but like everything. Yeah. I'm a very detail oriented, meticulous planner. So PA school, like I said early on, there was no plan B. This was it. And so the moment that I had to make that decision, the anxieties, I mean, it was setting in before, but like I said, I would like surrender was all I had left. I mean, I felt like there was nothing else I could give. But the fear of the unknown of like, I mean, even like realistic things, like I was renting a house. So it's like, how am I going to pay for, I mean, because in school, like I did have to take out some loans and stuff, but I was like, okay, if I'm going to stay here, like, do I move home with my family? Like, where am I going to get a job? And how am I going to pay for things? Like all of those things started creeping in.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a lot of anxiety, but also the peace of just like, okay, I'm giving this over to him. Like, he's going to take care of it, so.
Yeah. So what happened next after you withdrew?
Okay, so this is where the story gets so cool, at least when I think back, because it kind of brings me to where I am today. But despite all of the craziness that was going on, I surrendered it all to the Lord and truly just blind faith. And I didn't mention this, but like one of my biggest concerns was I had a biology degree. So most people don't get a biology degree unless they're planning to go to med school or PA school or some other school.
Yeah, you have to couple it with something else.
It's not like I study biology because I just love biology. I mean, I did enjoy it, don't get me wrong. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life now? And so crazy. So a day or so, it might have even been the next day, I had made a post on Facebook because at this point I had a trail of people praying for my mental and my well-being, like over this whole, my mom had kept people in the loop and just updating them. And so I made a post, like, letting everyone know, like, I'm withdrawing, please give me your prayers, whatever. And I had a friend who I actually had only crossed paths with a couple of times at a church camp growing up. And she messaged me. It was like, I saw your post about withdrawing from PA school. I just was wondering, are you planning to stay in Shreveport? And I was like, honestly, I don't really know. I just need to be. And she said, well, I work at a urology clinic here and we're looking for a clinical research coordinator. And I was like, research? Like, that sounds lame.
Yeah. Lame sauce.
I was like,
keep looking.
Appreciate it. Yeah. No, but in my head, I mean, and I'd done like some research stuff in college where I sat in a lab all day and like worked with lizards and like weird stuff, scholarship, but like, I was like, like, that's really cool. But in my head, I'm not going to lie, I totally marked it off. I was like, no, that sounds like something that I was very people person oriented, but then she said, no, it's not what you think. Just look it up, look into it. It's great money. But it also, she was like, I absolutely love this job. I would have never known it existed if I hadn't gone for it. And so knowing that this girl was just a solid, really just godly person, and I was needing that, a friend too, I looked into it and I was like, wait, this is so cool. Like, this job allows me to see patients and like do research, like run clinical trials. And I'm a huge like knowledge person. Like I'm such a geek. Like I love to learn and study things. And so I was like, I can, it's not the kind of research I thought. So she got me connected with her boss. I ended up emailing her and she was like, and the boss was like, hey, just send me your resume. And I was like, oh shoot, I don't have a resume.
And you're like, crap, how to make that? Yeah, I know.
Then all of a sudden, light bulb went off. And I remembered my last semester of college, I took a class where they basically just try to prepare you for real life.
Yeah.
Also, they try to prepare you for failure. So it's called undergrad seminar, and it's for biology students. And they taught us how to make a resume just in case we ever got into the schools and stuff we wanted to get into. It was like preparing us for failure and disappointment. But anyway, I was like, okay, I remember making a resume, like a mock one during that class. And just like look at it and, build up.
Spruce it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get on my laptop and I start searching and like I pull it up. And at the time we had to find a job to build this resume around. We had to find a job. The assignment was to find a job that we would enjoy that only required like a bachelor's in biology. And so anyway, I found it on my computer and it's for the exact same job
that's crazy. That's wild.
A clinical research coordinator. And I was like, how in the world did I build a resume for this job that in my head right now, I don't feel like I ever knew existed?
Yeah.
And so it was so crazy. All I did was change the date on the top and then add that I graduated and then submitted. And within a day or so, I got an interview, met with the lady. She was one of the godliest women she still is one of the godliest women I've ever met. And it's just been incredible. I mean, she had been praying for the right person and had so many people and so many resumes, but said that when she saw mine, that she just knew it was the Lord. And we shared testimony. And it was just the craziest thing. So long story short, I'm still there and I love
it. So like, I mean, how many days had it been since you like withdrew from school that happened?
Two since she messaged, since the girl, my friend
messaged you. That is wild.
I physically just got chills because like, when you are that much of a plan, like it was just so much proof of like the sovereignty and the provision of God. Like,
yeah,
I mean, because here's the other thing. Prior to getting into PA school, I spent a few weeks with the guy I was actually dating at the time. We both were trying to find jobs in healthcare in Shreveport. When I tell you, it wasn't even for me. Sorry. It was for him. And we couldn't find any healthcare jobs that weren't like maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I withdrew from school, I was like, there's no way I'm going to find anything here that even remotely meets the criteria, and it's like once you do your PA school, I mean, I had gained so much knowledge that I was like, I don't want to go do maintenance at a hospital.
Yeah.
But it's crazy when I look back, like the job, like what I do now, God used so much of what I learned during that time in PA school, also combined with the research and things that I did in college to like prepare me for this job in particular.
Yeah.
And so it was super fast how it's almost like he was like, Kayla, I need you to trust me. I need you to trust me. And I was like, okay, God, that's all I have left is surrender. Like, this is it. And so I did. And the blessing just came almost immediately. And it's like,
that's just wild. Because if anyone else has been on a job search, like 2 weeks can feel like eternity.
Yeah.
So 2 days, like, wow. Yeah. Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And just, being the person that she was to interviewed you and the whole thing that went through. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
It was definitely the Lord. There's no doubt about it.
But we're going to back up for a second. So leading up to all that, like, what are some things that gave you like, some doubt and some insecurities? Like what was holding you back, during that? What was that? I mean, I guess you said it was a summer and
it was like
6 months of
like eternity of turmoil.
Yeah, I know.
When you're dealing with depression and stuff, which like you kind of mentioned, like I was newer to that whole, like I had never really experienced it, but Satan just really got a hold of that and just like twisted so many things in my life and just really made me believe things like that I wasn't good enough, that I was a failure, that everything that I knew about God wasn't true, and that he had that he had intentionally confused me, like made me think that this was his plan and just to take it away, you know. And one of the bigger things is that I'm still almost recovering from to this day is the thought that I didn't know the voice of God. Like something that
did I miss it?
So like for so long I was so familiar with for it to be so confusing to me. So now, because even now, like, I mean, it's something that I struggle with.
You know, Kayla, like I'm hearing this and hearing you say that. I'm like, I feel like we're sisters. Like, no, because, and I say this because when I, very much like you, I'm a planner. I used to be like, hold fast 10 year plan girl. Like that was like me too. Like same, because it's like, what's the point? But like, but before, you know, before real life, you know, because I feel like you have like that luxury to like plan like that when when you're, in a secure location, like with other people are meeting your needs. Yeah. Like if you're in high school or college and you're still not having to like, you know, make some harder decisions. Cause I say harder because school's still hard. Like I'm not going to diss that, but I also, cause I remember the moment where I was about to graduate and then I felt, wait, hold up. I think I should have done something else. But when you're like a senior in college, you're not starting over. Oh, yeah, no, but I was so distraught. And I remember telling God, like, Lord, you told me, because we had a conversation. You and I had a conversation when I was like, you know, senior year of high school or, you know, early freshman year of college and what we're going to do. And you told me this was the plan. How can you now tell me something totally different? Like, I don't understand. Like, you can't do that to me. So I very much feel that. Yeah. And then I spent some years of like, what is this? Yeah. But I have to say, like, you know, here I am like 10 years later, well, in a few years, 10 and a few years later. Yeah. And I just learned for me, it's just, you know, the plan isn't like point A to point B to point C. It's not this one linear thing, you know, that's just not God. And for me, I just feel really akin to Abraham. And I don't know if when I was kind of like, because we can have a whole podcast about Melissa, about my life and where I've been since graduating back in 2011. Oh my gosh, I'm old, Kayla. But I just, man, that God does not do the whole point A to point B. It's like all over the place, but it's where He wants it to be. But all those pieces, just like you were saying, were for a purpose. Like He didn't want you to go there for the whole year or 2 years. He didn't want you to graduate. He just wanted you to get the 6 months of knowledge. Yeah. Yeah. And the world standard is not His standard.
Yeah. And it's even crazy because I had the girl, like there's so many details. Like I could spend hours. I know I talk a lot, but like there's so many details that like I just didn't even see at the time. Like one of the girls that I ended up being a roommate with during that time didn't really know the Lord. Like she had a different faith and we became really good friends, and I was able to share that with her. Yeah. Little things like that it's obviously like God had me there, even if it was just for that moment, you know, or there's so many things.
Yeah. There's different like growth points for us that, you know, is there for a purpose. I mean, it's there for a purpose. And so it is for growing us for whatever purpose He does for have for us in the future. But it's always easier to see it looking backward. Because definitely in the middle, especially in the middle of the confusing part, because when you thought it was definitely, you know, like I'm sure like, again, like Abraham, I really feel akin to him, his story as well, because, you know, he thought the promise was going to be like, they're going to make a baby somehow. Yeah. And God's like, no, like Ishmael and Hagar, like all that's not the way. You know, I'm giving you that a different way. And it wasn't all how He thought it would be. You know, so it just, I don't know, just God does not work how we work. And yeah, so just like you, I don't do the 5-year plan girl anymore. I still have a 5-year agenda, but it's a lot more of a tentative. Yeah, like here's, you know, but I don't hold on to it as hard as I used to. Yeah, it was definitely a humbling moment for me. And honestly, Kayla, I'm just being real honest about it, because I didn't even realize in my heart that I was like haughty about my plans until I had a conversation with my mother. And because I was moving, oh my goodness, I moved a lot of places in the last during that time too. Until she said something, in my immediate response, I had to close my mouth, because what was about to come out of my mouth, I knew was going to be so ugly. And I was like, but that was revealing to me, like, no, I thought that I was quote unquote better because I had a plan.
Yeah.
No, sister.
And I didn't realize how much of my identity was wrapped into my plans. I mean, when I tell you, I was a wreck. I was like, life is over now that I'm not.
Or who am I?
Marrying this boy. Like, there is. I mean, I was telling God things like, there is absolutely no way that you have someone better for me. Like, I'm like, me telling God that. Like, that's silly.
Yeah.
But when I tell you, I believed that with my whole heart at the time. Like, I was like, there is absolutely no way that my life could be better than what I had picked for me.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, thank you, Jesus. Like, happiest, because one thing I didn't mention is within a few weeks or a couple of months of I'm going through all this trauma, and sweet friend that I was dating, decides to get married real quick, and so very happy, but like that alone was like, okay,
whoa,
like now I look back, I'm like, and I look at my life versus what it would have, it's just so different. Like God was truly protecting me and him, and he was being obedient by saying there wasn't a peace. I didn't understand it at the time. I was so hurt. I was devastated. I was like, you're betraying me right before my finals,
Yeah, this is not, couldn't this have waited a week?
But now I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, boy, for following that guidance of the Lord, because it wasn't his plan. So.
Yeah. And so what are some other things that helped you, move out of that season and start going towards really cling into God? What are some of those things?
One of the things was, I just remember really struggling again with recognizing God's voice. And I was so confused by that. And I was like, how can I figure out, I've got to fix this issue, because God's got to be my rock. I've got to be familiar with, I've got to know the difference between my desires and his voice,
Right.
And so I just remember just being in a time of prayer and just really spending time with him, and through so many conversations with people in my family and my older brother, who was just so wise. And I remember him sharing some scripture with me that was just focusing on the character of God and just really knowing his character. And I think there's a place in Psalms, I believe it's Psalms somewhere, that talks about they forgot his works, something about the people forgetting the works and the miracles of God, but they remember his character. And so I just really started diving into the character of God. And through that journey, just really forcing myself to recognize his presence in my life. But God also I remember one day he was just like, Kayla, I need you to remember. I need you to remember the times that I've been faithful, the times that I've been good in your life. Remember those times. And so I started focusing and remembering in those times of darkness, it's really hard to feel his presence. In that moment, it's hard to see him. It's hard to see him at work sometimes, even though he's there. There's no doubt he's there. But even your flag, just when I was saying earlier, I would look at my Bible and see it there. I knew it was, and that was the Lord, but I would refuse to open it. And so I just remember him just showing me Kayla, even though it's hard for you to see me, I just need you to just focus on remembering the things that I've done in the past. If you can't see me, if you can't see and feel me right now, think about the times that you have before.
Yeah, his faithfulness.
I know that sounds kind of but it forced me to remember God's goodness and just really hone into that. And that's what gave me a lot of the strength. There were so many times where I was like, God, where are you? I'm so confused. And that brought clarity. Just really remembering all the times that he's brought me through and the times that he turned my family's life around and saved my dad, which is my salvation. Just so many things where he just provided and took care of me and was faithful and just kept his promises. And I can go on and on. But
did you like writing that down or just like made mental notes?
So actually, no, I have a notebook that I actually had started where I started writing down the characteristics of the Lord, but also just writing down moments where like I remembered how faithful he was, like times in the past. Like I also remember pulling some of my old prayer journals and like that like would just trigger, because I'm telling you, I was in such a dark place that I was even at first I was struggling. I was like, I don't know where, but like I highly encourage prayer journaling, and I'm not the best at it all the time, but if you can write down your prayers, and not just the prayers, but when he answers them, that is so cool to look back on, because it just reminds you of the faithfulness that he.
Yeah, it's like an Ebenezer, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Memorial. For those who don't know, like Ebenezer is mentioned in like the Old Testament, and it's like basically like a pillar of rocks, but it's like a monument or a memorial in a way of like, and of deliverance of the Lord. Like that's what Ebenezer is, and for the purpose of what you just stated, like remembering God's faithfulness. So yeah, it's good. Man, well, you know, Kayla, if someone was right now going through a similar situation where they just feel disillusioned and just like, I don't know who I am right now, I don't know what's going on, you know, what is something that you would say to them?
I think I would just give the advice that I feel like the Lord had shown me at the same time, which is that when you're in that dark place and you just feel like you don't know where the Lord is, if you're having one of those human moments where you just can't, you feel like you can't feel him or see him in that time, like just really focus on just remembering where he's been. And I think that just allowing yourself to remember God's goodness can really help, you know, draw you out of that dark place. And sometimes it's hard to remember too. So I just really pray and ask the Lord for guidance in that, and ask him to bring to mind those times where he's been good and faithful, and to also just open your eyes to recognizing him. But, you know, just I also would recommend, like I said, is writing things down, because you never know when you're going to be in that moment where you just are searching, you're in such a dark place, or you're desperate for some source of encouragement, and writing your prayers down, or just the times that he's been faithful in your life, can be really encouraging, you know, really helpful in that.
Yeah. And so how would you say that, you know, this whole situation, now that you're like, you know, you've been on the other side for a while now, like how is your relationship with God now?
I think it really has changed my perspective on life. I'll be honest. Because like I said earlier, I'm a very detail oriented person. And so it's crazy because I'm really observant of a lot of the things in my life and the details. But this has helped me be observant of God, like God's presence in my life, and just really recognize his characteristics. And also when I'm faced with confusion with whether something is my flesh or his voice, because that was truly one of the biggest things. That I struggled. I mean, to this day, I mean, there have been so many times where I'm like scared to death to put my hope in something, because I'm like, what if that's not God? Because I've been through this before. What if it feels right and I feel that peace, but like, what if it's not God? Because I felt peace with this, you know, but just really reflecting on his character and recognizing in those situations when I'm faced with, you know, decisions or certain situations, like really comparing those to his character. And like, if it causes confusion, if it causes anxiety and depression.
Yeah, if it's causing that, it's probably not the best way, you know.
God, even though you feel like it's what's best for you at the time. It can be so deceiving, you know. And your heart can be deceiving.
Yes, Jeremiah says that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we as Christians a lot of times forget. Like we're like, oh, follow your heart. No, don't always follow your heart.
Do not follow your heart. Follow the Lord.
And so just really not only just studying the character of God, but also really recognizing his like in certain situations, like comparing those situations, like to whether or not it's drawing me closer to his characteristics or further away. So
and like we don't want you to be paralyzed with it, because when you're part of being in relationship with him and knowing his voice is kind of knowing like, okay, was this something that's going to bring glory to God? Or because if it's not, then, then don't go down that path. But more than likely, you're going to choose things that are okay, this is going to be, bring glory and honor. Like it's not going to be detracting from that. So it's okay to go down that path. And if things don't work out, that doesn't mean necessarily it wasn't of God. It just means like you only needed that piece of it. Like you only needed 6 months of that school.
Yeah, that's so true. That's even something that honestly right now I don't think, just you saying it that way, it brings some light, because a lot of times, I found myself saying, well, that it just, none of that was God's plan. It was mine, but it's like, no, he used that. He needed me there for that time.
Because Kayla, and this is for anybody too, like the Lord is so sovereign. Like he often bends the wheel of wicked people to what he wants to happen.
For sure. Yeah. Like
there's been times in scripture that he has said that, and you hear that, and especially in the Old Testament, you're like, he did what? We forget that. Yeah. And even like we put our standards of success, and it's, well, is that God's standard of success? So what is that? Because I will say, even for me, I feel like, man, we're sisters. Because like, I was kind of dealing with, the anxiety of when I taught, to teach, a lot of anxiety. I hated the beginning of school year in a different way, not just because of, people always moan, oh no, I have to go to work. It was different. I was like in knots, like every time. And just being overwhelmed with the amount of stress I dealt with on a daily basis. It made my home life with my new husband and all that very difficult. Yeah. Just when you're living in that kind of like that is chaos. That's how you know, like, hey, maybe not. Yeah. Maybe this is not the way to keep trudging. Like, and because you don't, and I remember being in that place of feeling like, well, I felt like God had called me to be in that. I left a different situation that I loved because I felt the Lord had called to do that. And for me, I feel like he called me for that for a season, not for my life. Yeah. For some people, he does call them for their life. Yeah. But it's not everybody. I don't know. Like I just believe that he calls us to what he wants us to, and it doesn't have to be for what the whole standard of what the world would say. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
No, it's so true.
That's my 2 cents.
Think back on I was going to a church that I was dating at the time was going to. Loved it. But, even through like the breakup and everything, eventually like it drew me, or because of that, it kind of pushed me to the church that I'm at now and that I'm able to serve. Yeah. So it's so crazy. And it's not bad or like, sometimes in the moment it's like, oh, that stinks, or like, yeah, I'm not bitter that any of those things didn't work out. I'm at a place. There were times where I was, but like now looking back, I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you that you provided him a great solution, and like also me, and then the school that you gave me this great job, and like it's just
I get paid the way for those things.
1,000%. So it's really cool to be able to finally be at a place where you're able to have peace, and God's able to show you, because a lot of times when things don't work out, there's some times where you don't ever know why, or certain things happen, and you don't really get to see the reasons why it happened or didn't happen. But thankfully, with this situation, there's been a lot of areas where like God's been like, this is why, and it's, let me tell you, it's humbling. Oh, yes, yes. I thought I knew what was best.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you remembered his goodness.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that he gave you that as a way of like, helping you heal. That's great.
Yeah, there was, I took some of our students in my church to camp a couple years ago, and one of the pastors, he said this quote, and I have it written in my Bible, and I put it here, but it said that he was actually talking about his own life, but I totally stole it, because I was like, oh my gosh, it just hit me. I was like, that was me like a few years ago. But he said, I would have given up had I not remembered the goodness of God. And golly, that was so true. Because like, I remember in that moment where God brought me to my knees, and I was ready to give up. And it's like, but no, Kayla, remember how good I am. Like, remember what I've done. Like, I'm here with you. Like, I've not forgotten you, and
that's awesome.
That's where that glimmer of hope and that little bit of strength, even to just surrender it all, came from. And so, yeah. And actually in Lamentations, it's chapter 3, 19 through 24. It says, I love this because this was one of the biggest things that God used to, is still just buried in my heart. But it says, remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will have hope in him. So I just love that because
it's beautiful.
It says, remember my affliction and my wanderings. Then he goes on to say, like, that his soul constantly is remembering, like, all of the affliction. But then it says, but this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. And it talks about the steadfast love of the Lord and how new his mercies are, his faithfulness. And so it's like, I feel that so deeply because I'm like, I have been there. I have been there where, like, the scars of the past, like, seem like the only thing that my soul can hold on to. But then it's like, but this I call to mind.
It's like you have the power to remember that. Like, no, like you can, like, there is, there's something there that can allow you to remember that.
And and it even reminds me of, like, in Psalm 27, where it says, I'm confident of this, that I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living, or the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And it's the confidence there, just knowing his character, like being so confident in his voice that you know that you'll see that goodness because you're confident because you experience. I mean, that was David, who's gone through so much, and, like, God had continuously brought him through so much. And it's like, I remember in that passage, he's, like, crying out to the Lord, and, like, everything's going wrong. He's running from enemy. I mean, there's so many crazy things. And then he's like, but I'm confident in this, that I will see your goodness in the land of
and this one thing.
He had experienced God and his goodness in so many different areas of his life. So
it's awesome. Man, Kayla, this has been a wonderful conversation. Yeah, I know we talked a lot off mic, and I was like, man, this would be great. But now I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize how intertwined our stories would be. But I really enjoyed having this conversation, and I really feel like this will be an encouragement to a lot of people.
My name is Kayla, and this is my story of the middle.
I'm your host, Brandy Bostic, and you've been listening to the Up From the Mutt podcast. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Threads. And if you want a little extra about the guest I interview, check out my Patreon account in the show notes below.
Psalm 40, verse 2. He brought me up from the desolate pit out of the muddy clay and set my feet on the rock, making my steps secure.